I raised my sister's abandoned baby as my own son for 25 years. Then her entitled daughter demanded I buy her a new car. When I said no, she vandalized and destroyed my son's car. Yes, you heard that right. The same girl who used to call me Auntie Karen as a toddler, who I used to take to the movies and buy Christmas gifts for, spray-painted "spoiled brat" across the hood of my son's car and shattered 2 of its windows with a crowbar. I stood in our driveway, frozen, staring at the wreckage. My son, Ethan, was silent beside me. He didn't say a word. He just clenched his fists, eyes wide, blinking hard to hold back tears. That car was his pride. He worked after school, saved for months, and even paid part of the insurance himself. It wasn't just a car. It was his independence, his reward, his symbol of effort. And now it was trashed. The police had already been called by our neighbor, thank God for them. And thank God for our security cameras too, because the footage was crystal clear. It was her. Haley. My sister's daughter. My niece. She laughed on camera. She posed for photos as she and another girl smashed the body of the car like it was some kind of joke. In that moment, I felt something inside me snap. But that snap wasn't rage. It wasn't even shock. It was grief. Grief for the years I spent building a life, protecting my kids from the toxicity I grew up in. Grief for the illusions I had tried to maintain, for the sake of family. And grief for the girl I once hoped I could love like my own, even though she never was. I know what you're thinking. How did it come to this? Let me take you back 25 years, back to a day when I was only 18 and my sister, 4 years older than me, showed up at our parents' house with a crying newborn in her arms and no intention of raising him. That baby was Noah, and he became my son. And this is the story of how loving him cost me everything, but also gave me more than I could have ever imagined. Noah was just a few weeks old when I realized my sister had no intention of being his mother. Samantha was 22. I had just turned 18. She'd had him with her boyfriend, now her husband. But from the very beginning, it was clear that neither of them cared. They treated baby like an inconvenience, not their children. They went out partying, stayed out all night, and left him with whoever happened to be around. Sometimes they wouldn't even call to check in. I'd come home from school and find Noah in a dirty diaper that hadn't been changed in hours, red-faced from crying and hoarse from exhaustion. I didn't know what I was doing. I was a teenager. I had dreams. I wanted to go to prom, graduate, and go to college. But suddenly I found myself holding this tiny, helpless life in my arms, and there was no one else stepping up. So I did. At first, I thought it would just be temporary. A few weeks, a few months, until Samantha figured it out. But days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and it became clear that this baby wasn't her priority. He wasn't anyone's priority, except mine. My grandmother, bless her heart, helped me when she could. I'd go to school during the week, and on weekends I'd clean her house and cook for her in exchange for help watching Noah. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But somehow we made it work. My parents weren't much better. They gave me about $100 a month for the baby, as they called him. Like he was some pet I had to feed. That barely covered formula, let alone diapers, clothes, doctor visits. Most of the time, it was just me and my grandma, juggling everything we had to make sure Noah was okay. I still remember missing senior prom because I had to choose between buying a dress or buying formula. And I chose the formula without a second thought. That should tell you everything you need to know. One day, about a year after I graduated, I came home and found all of my things in garbage bags by the front door. My parents were done. They told me it was time I figured things out on my own. And Samantha, my sister, looked me dead in the eyes and said she wished she'd never had Noah. Who says that? Who looks at their own child and says that out loud? I remember looking down at him, barely a toddler, sitting on the floor with a toy in his lap, not understanding anything that was happening. Just looking up at us with those wide, trusting eyes. I knew then that I had to protect him. From everyone. Even from the people who were supposed to love him the most. My grandmother and I went to a family law attorney. We didn't have money, but we had enough to get the paperwork done. Samantha and her boyfriend signed away their parental rights like they were giving up an old piece of furniture. No hesitation, no emotion, just 2 signatures on a page and they were gone. Just like that, I became Noah's legal mother. I was barely out of high school. I didn't have a degree. I didn't have a career. I had a baby and a part-time job at a retail store that barely paid minimum wage. My manager kept pressuring me to work extra shifts, but I couldn't. I had to study. I had to feed Noah. I had to take care of everything. I was constantly exhausted. I remember falling asleep at the kitchen table while studying and waking up hours later with my face stuck to a textbook, drool soaking through the pages. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't some inspiring fairy tale. It was real. It was messy. And it was all mine. When my grandmother passed away, Noah was 6. I thought I'd lose everything. She left the house to me in her will. A tiny 2-bedroom in an old neighborhood, barely standing in some parts, but it was ours. For the first time, I had something solid. A home. A place to build something. That's when the vultures circled back. Samantha and my parents suddenly became interested in reconnecting. They smelled the inheritance before the funeral flowers even wilted. But I made it clear. If they wanted back in, they would have to act right. My dad tried. And over time, he and I built something. Not perfect, but something. My mom? Not so much, and Samantha. She stayed away. At least for a while. It was just me and Noah. And somehow that was enough. Until Michael walked into our lives. Michael came into our lives when I wasn't looking for anyone. We met at community college. I was taking night classes, trying to finish a nursing degree while juggling work and motherhood. He was working during the day and studying at night, just like me. Maybe that's why we clicked so fast. We understood struggle. We didn't have to explain it. Still, I was cautious. I didn't let him meet Noah for almost a year. I needed to know he was serious. I needed to be sure he wasn't going to walk out once things got hard. When they finally met, I remember watching them from the hallway. Michael crouched on the floor playing with action figures, doing silly voices for each character, and Noah laughing so hard his little shoulders shook. It was the first time I'd seen Noah laugh like that in weeks. That was the moment I knew Michael was different. He never once made Noah feel like a burden. He never made me feel like I had to choose between being a mother and being loved. He simply folded himself into our lives with kindness, patience, and a sense of quiet strength I hadn't known I needed. When Noah was 8, everything changed. I found out I was pregnant, my first biological child. Michael was over the moon. We'd planned it, we were ready, but I still felt nervous, not about the baby, about how Noah would feel. I was terrified he'd think this new baby meant he was being replaced. Then we heard that Samantha was pregnant too. I found out through my dad, not from her directly. We hadn't spoken in years, but suddenly Samantha started calling, reaching out, saying she wanted to reconnect with Noah. At first I was hopeful. Naively hopeful. I thought maybe being pregnant again had made her realize what she'd given up. That maybe she wanted to make things right with the son she'd abandoned. I was wrong. Samantha didn't come back for Noah. She came back to sabotage him. She started saying cruel things to him during their short visits. Things no child should ever have to hear. They're going to have their real baby now. They won't love you the same. When their actual son is born, you'll see how different they treat him. They're not your real parents, you know. We only found out when Noah came to us crying one night. He was curled up in a ball on his bed, sobbing so hard he could barely breathe. His little hands clung to the edge of the blanket like it was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. He asked if we were going to send him away, if we'd stop loving him once the baby came. I saw red. There are few things in life that turn a mother into something primal. That night, I became that mother. I called Samantha and told her never to contact us again. I told her that if she ever came near my son again, she'd deal with me. Michael agreed completely, and together we enrolled Noah in therapy. Family therapy, individual therapy. We didn't want him to carry the burden of someone else's rejection. We wanted him to know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that he was wanted, that he was ours, that nothing would change that. When our second son, Ethan, was born, we made sure Noah was part of everything. He helped pick out clothes. He helped decorate the nursery. He was there the day we brought Ethan home, and he was the first to hold him after me and Michael. He never showed resentment, only love. He was gentle with the baby, protective in a way that made my heart ache with pride. Every time Ethan cried, Noah would be the first to rush over and pat his tiny chest, whispering softly, "It's okay. I'm here." That's who Noah became. Kind, loving, loyal. And that's why, years later, when Samantha reached out again, this time through a long email full of apologies, I didn't know what to do. Michael didn't trust her. I didn't either, but there was a part of me that wondered if maybe, just maybe, she'd changed. So we went low contact. Not because I wanted her in my life, but because her daughter Haley was around the same age as Ethan. They were cousins. They might go to the same school. It felt like the adult thing to do, keeping things civil for the sake of the kids. I never left Noah alone with Samantha. Not once. I checked in with him after every visit. I monitored every conversation. I thought I was doing enough to keep the damage out. But the truth is, when you let a toxic person back into your life, even a little, the poison always finds a crack. And that crack, tiny at first, started with small requests. "Can you help with school supplies? She needs new shoes. Would you mind buying her a phone?" And then came the car. Ethan was turning 17, and we had planned it for months. Just like we did with Noah, we decided to surprise him with a used car. Nothing fancy, just something reliable, safe, and symbolic. A reward for his hard work and a lesson in responsibility. Ethan had a part-time job at the local bookstore, and he had been saving diligently. He knew he'd have to contribute to the cost and cover his own gas. It wasn't a handout. It was a partnership. We found a silver Honda in good condition with low mileage. The day we gave it to him, his reaction made every penny worth it. He jumped up and down, hugged Michael and me so tightly I could barely breathe, and kept saying, "Are you serious? Is this real?" It was one of those golden family moments you replay in your mind for years. And then, just a few days later, everything began to unravel. Haley, my niece, Samantha's daughter, also had a birthday coming up. She and Ethan were born just 2 weeks apart. And somewhere along the line, Samantha had promised her a car too. The only problem? She had no way to afford it. So, naturally, she called me. No hello, no catching up. Just straight to the point. "Haley's birthday is coming up. She's expecting a car like her cousins got. I figured you guys could handle it since, you have the money." I thought I misheard her. I asked her to repeat that. She did, even slower this time. As if the sheer audacity of her demand wasn't offensive enough, she said it like it was a given, like it was my obligation to step in. I told her no, calmly, directly. I never promised Haley a car. She's not my child. She's not my responsibility. That's when the insults began. She accused me of thinking I was better than her. Said I'd always been the golden child. Said it wasn't fair that my kids got everything while hers had to suffer. And I lost it. I told her maybe, just maybe, If she or her husband could hold down a job for more than 6 months, they could afford things like this. I told her she had no right to put that kind of pressure on me or on Haley, that she was the one who made empty promises, and I wasn't going to clean up her mess. She hung up on me. For a brief moment, I thought that was the end of it. A fight. A severed conversation. Maybe she'd cool down, find another way to deal with the car situation. Help Haley get a job, start saving. You know, like normal parents do. But that was wishful thinking. Haley called me next, screaming, crying. She asked me why I hated her. Why I treated her like an outsider. Why I couldn't treat her like I treated her brother, meaning Noah. She said she told all her friends she was getting a car, that now she looked like a liar, that I'd ruined her birthday. I tried to explain. I tried to be gentle, even though she was yelling in my ear. Haley, I said, Noah is not your brother. He's your cousin. And even though he's your biological sibling, he's my son. I raised him since he was a baby. I've been there for him through everything. You're my niece, and I care about you. But I'm not your mother. And then I said something I regret. Not because it wasn't true, but because of how it landed. I told her that Noah would always be more important to me than she ever would be. The line went silent. Then she screamed, called me cruel, and hung up. Samantha called me minutes later, accused me of playing favorites, of damaging her daughter, of ruining their relationship. I reminded her that she had done that all on her own, that she was the one who promised a car she couldn't provide, that I wasn't the villain here. I was just the one holding the boundary. The next few days were a blur of cold silence and angry messages. Some family members took Samantha's side. Even my mom called and told me I should be ashamed for not helping family in need. I wanted to ask her where that family was when I was 18, alone and feeding someone else's child. But I stayed quiet. Then, Ethan's car was destroyed. We had gone out for dinner, our first night out as a family in weeks. It was supposed to be a celebration. When we returned home, our neighbor had already called the police. Spray paint, dents, broken windows, scratched metal, and those words scrawled across the side. Feiksche you. Spoiled brat. It wasn't just vandalism. It was a message. Michael checked the security footage. We watched it together, our stomachs churning. There she was, Haley, with another girl, laughing, filming themselves, taking selfies as they smashed Ethan's car with a baseball bat. They didn't even try to hide it. 20 minutes of destruction, like it was some kind of twisted performance. We turned the footage over to the police. They arrested Haley the next morning. And just like that, everything I'd tried so hard to hold together completely fell apart. The arrest didn't bring relief. It brought war. That same afternoon, my sister and my mother showed up at our house unannounced. They didn't knock. They pounded, yelling, screaming, demanding I drop the charges, demanding I fix this. My mother, my own mother, looked me in the eyes and said, "You're ruining Haley's life. Over a car? That car was my son's first taste of freedom. It was the result of his hard work. It was part of a promise we made to him. That effort leads to reward, that doing the right thing matters." And now it was gone. Smashed. Violated. And the girl who did it, my niece, was being defended by the very people who were supposed to stand by me. I tried to stay calm. I told them the police were handling it, that it was out of my hands now. But more than that, I told them this was not just about vandalism. It was about entitlement. It was about decades of toxic patterns that I was no longer willing to tolerate. Michael stood beside me the whole time, silent, steady, a wall at my back. My mother stormed out, but not before yelling that I was cruel, heartless, and ungrateful. Ungrateful. I stood in my kitchen that night replaying that word over and over in my head. Ungrateful for raising a baby no one wanted, for building a stable life from nothing, for choosing to love a child I didn't give birth to more fiercely than most love their own. That night, Michael and I sat down and had the conversation we'd been putting off for years. We decided to go no contact, not just with Samantha, not just with Haley, but with my mother too. My father, bless him, tried to stay neutral, but even he couldn't hold the line anymore. A few days later, he called to say he needed to see me. When he arrived, he looked exhausted, worn down in a way I hadn't seen before. He told me my mother had taken a large chunk of their retirement savings and given it to Samantha. Without telling him, it was supposed to be their future, their security, their peace. And now it was gone, given to the same daughter who hadn't worked a steady job in years, who had just raised a child who thought smashing a car was a justified response to disappointment. My dad said he was staying at a motel for a while. He needed space, needed to think. I felt sick. Even at 43, I was still somehow the reason my parents were falling apart. I offered to let him stay with us, but he declined, said he needed to clear his head. I cried that night, not because of what happened with Haley, not because of the car or the screaming or the chaos. I cried because I finally understood something that had taken me my whole life to admit. Sometimes family isn't love. It's just shared blood. And blood alone isn't enough. I didn't owe them anything. Not the people who abandoned me at 18. Not the sister who threw her child away like he was an inconvenience. Not the mother who only showed up when she needed something. And not the niece who mistook affection for obligation and hurt my son in the process. I sat with my boys that night. Noah on one side, Ethan on the other. We didn't talk much. Just sat on the couch, each of us holding a mug of hot cocoa Michael had made. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that wraps around you like a blanket. Noah looked at me and said, "I'm proud of you." And Ethan said, "I'm glad you chose us." In that moment, I knew. I hadn't lost anything. I had gained everything that truly mattered. I didn't expect to hear from Haley again. After the arrest, the screaming, the chaos with my mother and my father moving out, I assumed that door had finally closed. But a week later, I got a message. It was short. "Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't know what to feel. Anger, sadness, pity. I showed it to Michael. He didn't say a word, just nodded. He knew I needed closure, even if it was messy. We met at a small park near my house. I chose a public place, not because I was afraid, but because I needed the open air. I needed space between us. Real, physical space. When Haley arrived, she looked different. Smaller somehow. Not in size, but in energy. Her shoulders were slumped, her eyes tired. She didn't make eye contact. She sat across from me at the picnic table and didn't speak right away. I didn't either. Finally, she whispered, "I'm sorry." I let the silence linger, not to punish her, but because I needed to feel those words. I needed to know they weren't just thrown out like spare change. "I was angry," she continued. "I felt like I was always outside, looking in. You gave them everything. And I got nothing." Her voice cracked on that last word. She looked up at me for the first time, and what I saw wasn't malice. It was a girl who had never felt chosen. A girl who had grown up in the shadow of love she was never taught how to ask for. "I know what I did was wrong," she said. I thought maybe if I pushed hard enough, you'd finally see me. Care about me the way you care about them." My heart hurt. Not because she was right, but because the damage that shaped her wasn't all her fault. Her parents had failed her, repeatedly, and I had tried to help. But I couldn't be her mother. Not when I was already patching up the wounds left by the same people. I reached into my purse and handed her a folded envelope. Inside was a note. Not money, not an offer, just a list of resources, local therapists, support programs, a part-time job board, a few organizations that help teens transition into independence. I can't give you a car, I said softly. I can't fix everything, but I do care. I really do. And I want you to find your way. She didn't respond, just stared at the envelope in her hands. After a moment, she asked, "Will you ever forgive me?" I paused. Then I said the truth. I already have, but forgiveness doesn't mean access. Her eyes welled up. I'm not cutting you off forever, Haley, but right now I need to protect my boys and myself. She nodded, slowly, like she knew it was coming. We stood. I gave her a hug. Gentle, short. The kind of hug you give someone when a chapter ends and you don't know if there'll be another. As I walked back to my car, the sun had started to set. The sky was streaked with orange and gold. It felt like the right kind of ending. Bittersweet, but peaceful. At home, Noah was in the kitchen, helping Ethan with homework. Michael was playing music in the background, humming along off-key like he always did. This was my life. Not perfect, but safe. Honest. Built from love, not guilt. I stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching them. No one noticed me. And I liked it that way. It gave me time to breathe. Because after everything, after all the pain, betrayal, sacrifice, and noise, this is what remained. This is what mattered. I didn't need a big family. I didn't need validation. I didn't need apologies wrapped in expectations. All I needed was right here. 2 sons who knew they were loved, a partner who stood by me through every storm, and a heart that, after all these years, had finally found its way home. If this story touched your heart, or reminded you of a time you had to choose yourself and protect your peace, you're not alone. At her side of the story, we believe every woman's voice matters. Every heartbreak, every boundary, every act of quiet courage deserves to be seen and heard. So if you've ever felt invisible, or had to walk away from people who were supposed to love you, this space is for you. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because we're sharing more real stories just like this. Stories of strength, healing, and the power of finally saying, enough. This was her side of the story, and we're just getting started.